23rd of April 2021. Hare Krishna and good morning. So today we're reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Dhritarashtra quits home, and today is text 15. But first I'll just chant a little bit of Jai Radha Madhava. Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari, Jaya Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari, Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana, Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari, Jaya Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari, Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana, Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari, Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana, Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. A reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Dhritarashtra quits home, text 15. Abhiradaya madandam yatavada gukarisu yavadadara sudradvam shapadvasha shatam yama. Abhiradaya madandam yatavada gukarisu yavadadara sudradvam shapadvasha shatam yama. Abhiradaya madandam yatavada gukarisu yavadadara sudradvam shapadvasha shatam yama. Abhirat, administered. Aryama, dandam, punishment. Yatavat, as it was suitable. Agakarisu, unto persons who had committed sins. Yavat, as long as. Dadara, accepted. Sudratvam, the tabernacle of a Sudra. Shapat, as the result of a curse. Vashashatam, for 100 years. Yama, Yamaraj. Translation. As long as Vidura played the part of a Sudra, being cursed by Manduka Muni, our Yama officiated at the post of Yamaraj to punish those who committed sinful acts. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vidura, born in the womb of a Sudra woman, was forbidden even to be a party of royal heritage, along with his brothers Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Then how could he occupy the post of a preacher to instruct learned kings and kshatriyas as Dhritarashtra and Maharaj Yudhisthira? The first answer is that even though it is accepted that he was a Sudra by birth, because he renounced the world for spiritual enlightenment by the authority of Rishi Maitreya and was thoroughly educated by him in transcendental knowledge, he was quite competent to occupy the post of an acharya or spiritual preceptor. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, anyone who is conversant in the transcendental knowledge or the science of Godhead, be he a Brahmin or a Sudra, a householder or a sannyasi, is eligible to become a spiritual master. Even in ordinary moral codes maintained by Chanaka Pandit, the great politician and moralist, there is no harm in taking lessons from a person who may be by birth less than a Sudra. This is one part of the answer. The other is that Vidura was not actually a Sudra. He was to play the part of a so-called Sudra for 100 years, being cursed by Manduka Muni. He was the incarnation of Yamaraj, one of the 12 Mahajans, on the level with such exalted personalities as Brahma, Narla, Shiva, Kapila, Bhishma, Prahlad, etc. Being a Mahajan, it is the duty of Yamaraj to preach the cult of devotion to the people of the world, as Narada, Brahma, and other Mahajans do. But Yamaraj is always busy in his Plutonic kingdom, punishing the doers of sinful acts. Yamaraj is deputed by the Lord to a particular planet, some hundreds of thousands of miles away from the planet Earth, to take away the corrupt souls after death and convict them in accordance with their respective sinful activities. Thus Yamaraj has very little time to take leave from his responsible office of punishing the wrongdoers. There are more wrongdoers than righteous men. Therefore Yamaraj has to do more work than other demigods who are also authorized agents of the Supreme Lord. But he wanted to preach the glories of the Lord, and therefore by the will of the Lord he was cursed by Manduka Muni to come into the world in the incarnation of Vidura and work very hard as a great devotee. Such a devotee is neither a Sudra nor a Brahmin. He is transcendental to such divisions of mundane society, just as the personality of Godhead assumes his incarnation as a hog, but he is neither a hog nor a Brahma. He is above all mundane creatures. The Lord and his different authorized devotees sometimes have to play the role of many lower creatures to claim the conditioned souls, but both the Lord and his pure devotees are always in the transcendental position. When Yamaraj thus incarnated himself as Vidura, his post was officiated by Aryama, one of the many sons of Kashyapa and Aditi. The Adityas are the sons of Aditi, and there are 12 Adityas. Aryama is one of the 12 Adityas, and therefore it was quite possible for him to take charge of the office of Yamaraj during his 100 years' absence in the form of Vidura. The conclusion is that Vidura was never a Sudra, but was greater than the purest type of Brahman. And the translation again, as long as Vidura played the part of a Sudra, being cursed by Manduka Muni, Aryama officiated at the post of Yamaraj to punish those who committed sinful acts. Om Ajana Timarandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayarupa Gadamayam Dadati Swabadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadābhṛtā Shivasi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hari Hari, Hari Rama 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 Hari Hari, Hare Krishna 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 Hari Hari, Hari Rama 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 Hari Hari, Hare Krishna 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 Hari Hari, Hari Rama 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 Hari Hari. Jai. So the translation is simply reporting the fact that when somebody takes leave of a great post or a great office of state, and in this case the state is the state of Krishna, you have to have somebody who is going to deputize or take over. So in the translation it's just telling us that our Yama was going to do that, one of the adichas, who are also incredibly empowered personalities, so was very qualified to cover, if you like, for Yamaraj, who wasn't going on holiday, of course. That's often in the material world, that's the kind of situation that people go on their holiday, their vacation, and they get covered by somebody else who's qualified to cover them. But that wasn't what was happening with Yamaraj. He was going on an incredibly transcendental mission and fulfilling his desire as one of the 12 Mahajans to preach Krishna consciousness, to give Krishna consciousness. The word preach actually has negative connotations associated with it, really, in today's world. But really what it just simply means is giving Krishna consciousness to others like that. So that's what Yamaraj was doing. He wanted to do that. He saw all his other peers, if you like, who were doing that in terms of the other Mahajans, like Narada Muni, the great transcendental preacher through the various universes. So he was seeing others doing that, but he was busy, so busy in his other service, his main service, that he didn't have time. So this was his opportunity, if you like, and our Yama was covering for him while he was doing that. So it's just interesting in this whole pastime and in the purport today, where Prabhupada speaks about, and it's very interesting that the Dura, he was not allowed his royal heritage. He came from a royal heritage, but he was denied that on the basis of him being a Sudra, etc. So he was denied his actual royal heritage, yet he was qualified to preach to royalty due to his great renunciation of all things material and his pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, spiritual knowledge, spiritual emancipation, etc. And then also that his teacher was the great Maitreya Rishi like that. And then Prabhupada focuses again on this verse from Lord Chaitanya that Lord Chaitanya spoke. Incredible verse, so prophetic actually, and so instructive for all of us. And the verse is Kiba Vipra Kibranyasi Sudra Kenanai Ye Krishna Tatvadaita Say Guru Hai. And it simply means that whether I'm, or you, or all of us, whether we're a Brahmin, or a Kshatriya, or a Vaishya, or a Sudra, so the four Varnas, whatever Varna that that our proclivity is indicating we are, or whatever ashram we're situated in, whether we're in the brahmachari ashram, student life, whether we're in the grihastha ashram, householder life, married life, vanaprastha ashram, retiring from married life, or whether we've fully renounced and entered the sannyas ashram. So whether we're in any of those ashrams, or any of those varnas, or any mix of those, or whatever, that actually doesn't matter when it comes to teaching Krishna consciousness and giving Krishna consciousness. The only qualification is that we know the science of Krishna. We're following the science of Krishna like that. That's the qualification, not any relative consideration, as I say, about our varna or our ashram. And of course, the other consideration that Prabhupada raises is that anyway, Vidura was not a Sudra. He was not actually a Sudra. He was playing the role of a Sudra. And after being cursed by Manduka Muni. So Vidura, as the incarnation of Yamaraj, was cursed by Manduka Muni to become a Sudra. And that was as a result of an incident in his previous life and Manduka Muni's previous life, why he came to make this curse. So the story is, the pastime is that one day the police arrested thieves that were actually had come to Manduka Muni's place, his hermitage as it's described. They had come there, and the police came and they arrested them all. But in the chaos, and the police get things wrong sometimes. In the chaos, they also arrested Manduka Muni. So then, of course, Manduka Muni goes through the process, and next thing goes to a magistrate, and the magistrate, as well as punishing the thieves, he also punished Manduka Muni, and his punishment was that he would die, he would be killed by being pierced by a lance. Those big long weapons that they used to use, certainly in our kind of part of the world, sort of in the Middle Ages, like that, one of those big sharp lances. So that was what his punishment was, and that was going to happen. But just as it was about to happen, that he was about to be pierced by this lance, knowledge of this whole incident came to the king, and the king then immediately stopped the whole thing on the basis of Manduka being a great Muni, and also the fact, the fairly important fact, that he wasn't actually one of the thieves. Rather, as I said, it was a case of mistaken identity. The material world, what a place. You can mistake an identity. Can you imagine being mistaken for something serious? Serious as in this case, and certainly the punishment was serious. But you can even have more serious things, that you're mistaken for doing something abominable and it actually wasn't you. Then it takes great philosophical discipline, because then you're not only understanding the law of karma in a theoretical way, you're having to apply it in a very practical way like that. So anyway, this is what happened to Manduka Muni, but the king then stopped it because, as I say, he wasn't. He was a great Muni, but he also wasn't one of the thieves. And the king begged pardon for the mistake of those working under him, because ultimately the head of state is responsible for everything that goes on in their name, like that. So the police and the magistrate, etc., he begged forgiveness like that. But Manduka Muni accepted that, but then he went to Yamaraj because he wanted to find out what the story was, basically, because Yamaraj is in control of all these events, and while police may have may make the mistake of arresting somebody and accusing somebody in the wrong, Yamaraj shouldn't do that, or couldn't do that. It should be above that, and Yamaraj is actually understanding the whole picture and giving the punishment as is described in the purport, appropriate punishment to all of us, punishment and reward, whatever it may be. So he went there to ask Yamaraj what had actually happened in this case, and Yamaraj explained to Manduka Muni that in his childhood, meaning Manduka Muni's childhood, one time he had sharpened a straw, just this drinking straw that you would drink with, so he had sharpened it, and he had pierced an ant with that straw, and that's why Manduka Muni was put into this difficulty. But then Manduka Muni, he thought that was unfair on the part of Yamaraj for him being punished for something that he did in his childhood. And it is interesting that our understanding is that children from the age of 0 to 5, that they're kind of karma free. Whatever they do, they don't receive the karma, but their parents do. And then gradually from 5 to whatever age it is it 10, something like that, they're getting 50% of the karma, or maybe even less. But then eventually when they reach a certain age, is it 12 or is it 15, 16, it slips my mind, then they start receiving all of their karma themselves, and their parents are no longer responsible for them. So Manduka Muni was thinking that this was unfair, that as a kid, he had pierced an ant. And, I think many kids may be guilty of those types of things, where they don't really realize what they're doing, and they may make another living entity suffer. So that's why he pierced an ant, and now he was punishing him to be killed by being pierced by a lance. But because Manduka Muni thought that was unfair, he then cursed Yamaraj to appear as a Sudra. And that's how Vidura appeared as an incarnation of Yamaraj, but born of a mother, a Sudra mother, and therefore he was born a Sudra like that, even though he was actually one of the 12 Mahajans whose duty is actually to spread the message of Bhakti, or the message of Krishna consciousness, far and wide. But now this was giving him the opportunity to do that. That's the interesting juxtaposition, if you like, on the whole thing. That as Yamaraj, he was simply too busy, and Prabhupada explains in the purport that one of the reasons that he was busy, dishing out, if you like, the consequences for each living entity leaving this world due to their karma, and that's the same for all of us. Actually, one nice analogy I heard one time about this, it's like when you go to the airport. Of course, no one's going to the airport at the moment, but I think we can all still remember those experiences. So you go to the airport, and some people, I notice some people that they're very conservative or cautious when they're taking a flight, and they'll go many, many hours ahead of time just to make sure everything's in order and everything, they're not rushing and all of that. Other people, like myself, tend to be the people who, you're rushing up the escalator, you're rushing through security, just to catch your flight on time. So the analogy was that just like at airports, you've got different gates. And then, depending on where you go to your gate to get to your destination. And then if you're there early, they won't even have that air bridge, won't even have been put in place yet, because the plane may not even be there. So different people at different situations at the airport, some are getting on their plane, some are still waiting, etc., etc. So that air bridge, when it's coming and deciding which gate to go to and where the plane is that people will get on, that's a little bit like our destination at the time of death. Yamaraj and his team are deciding what our next destination is. Is it going to be, I don't know, sunny Malaga, or is it going to be, I don't know, what's that place called, Longyearbyen or something like that, the most northern city in the world, where it's freezing cold, etc. So our destination is being decided. The Yamaraj is kind of looking at our list of activities in the world in the lifetime that we're just leaving, and he's actually deciding how that is done, or where we're going to go, and then it describes how. I'm sorry to bring this up early on a Friday morning for you. Of course, it's all for our benefit that we understand these things, but it's described then that when it's decided where you're going, then Yamaraj, some of his servants, people who are helping in service, they come and they escort you there to that particular gate and that particular destination. And they have these horrible dogs, which we can only compare to those dogs that have to wear the muscles here on this planet. And they're guarding you, and those dogs don't have muscles on, and they're nipping at your ankles or nipping at you, whatever, and it's painful and it's hurting. It's described that what we would like to do is die, but the problem is we've already died, and now we're in our subtle bodies, if you like, and this is what we're experiencing. Of course, that's only if we've done, naughty things, wrong things, bad things. If we lead a good moral life, but also, more importantly, a Krishna conscious life, then we will be freed from all those things, and that won't actually be happening to us like that. So that's Krishna consciousness, using also the analogy of the carrot and the stick, it's very much a kind of carrot and stick thing, that the carrot is, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananda Rupam, entering into these, indescribably blissful relationships with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where the bliss just is unlimited and increasing at all steps. So that's the carrot for us, and really we should grab that juicy carrot and chew on it right away. But if somehow or another we don't do that, then the other approach is there from Krishna, that the stick approach, getting ourselves having some pain and suffering to kind of bring us to our senses, But that's the whole goal of it, just to bring us to our senses, so that we can actually enter into those blissful pastimes with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Yamaraj was so busy in that, because Prabhupada says in the purport something about there are far more wrongdoers than there are the righteous people, and that's the nature of the world that we live in the material world. It's Maya's kingdom, and therefore, there's more wrongdoers than righteous people. So consequently, Yamaraj is actually very, very busy. So, by the will of Krishna, this arrangement with Manduka Muni took place, and Vidura took birth as a Sudra. So that he could appear like that and engage in those pastimes that we're discussing now, and this particular one with his brother Dhritarashtra quitting home. But as I mentioned earlier, Prabhupada, he not necessarily today, but he comments extensively on this verse, Kiba Ripa Kiba Nasi Sudrakena Ye Krishna Tataveta Say Guru Hai. And he says things like, as far as Krishna consciousness is concerned, everyone, all of us, are capable of becoming a spiritual master, because knowledge of Krishna consciousness is on the platform of the spirit soul. It doesn't matter what our material condition is. And the word guru is equally applicable. Prabhupada talks like this because there's different types of guru. Three main ones, Vartman Padaksha Guru, Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru. So the Vartman Padaksha Guru is understood to be the guru we first come in contact with, that kind of puts us on the path of spiritual life and devotional service. And then the Shiksha Guru is the guru that instructs us on a regular basis to help us develop and progress in spiritual life. And then the Diksha Guru is the one who formally connects us to the Parampara, and of course that chain, disciplic link or Parampara, brings us from that Guru to his Guru, to their Guru, back, all the way back to Lord Krishna himself. And Prabhupada talks about, as I've said, it doesn't matter whether one is a grihasta or a sannyasi or a brahman or not a brahman. It really just doesn't matter, because, actually this is an interesting quote from Prabhupada. He says, because that is not the science of physiological, anatomical science, thinking that makes a difference, thinking that, what our ashram is or what our varna is, thinking that makes a difference. That's cobbler's science, as Prabhupada puts it. He says cobbler's science. And cobbler's science meaning that what kind of skin is it? It's not like that. Neither cobbler's science, nor anatomical science or physiological science, but it is bhagavad-tattva vijnanam, that this is another science, this is a transcendental science. So anyone who's well versed in Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad-Bhagavatam, in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, they can become guru like that, and not others. So even if you're a sannyasi in terms of your ashram, which is considered, from a relative perspective, the head of the ashrams, or if you're a brahman, which from a relative perspective is considered the head of the varnas. So even if you're a brahman sannyasi, if you don't know the science of Krishna, then you cannot become a guru, you cannot become a spiritual master, but you can be a sudra, and you can be a grihasta sudra like that, which relatively speaking is kind of the lower end of the varnas and the lower end of the ashrams. But if you know the science of Krishna, then you can become a spiritual master. But otherwise, people with cobbler science, meaning that they're focusing on the skin, they're focusing on the external, they cannot like that. He talks about, Lord Chaitanya has said that anyone who knows the science of Krishna, that person should be accepted as spiritual master, regardless of any so-called material qualifications, such as a rich man or a poor man, a man or a woman, a brahman or a sudra. It does not matter. And actually that particular reference, he was writing to one of his lady disciples. So he's specifically saying there that man or woman, it doesn't matter. If you know the science of Krishna, you can be spiritual master. And then Prabhupada there's one nice story that Prabhupada gives that I think is very relevant to this understanding of the way society is structured from a material point of view, but how that all is transcended once we are devotees and once we know Krishna, know who Krishna is, etc. So the story was that I think it was given a name. I'm not sure if it was given a name by Srila Prabhupada or somebody else, but it was the old lady's blessing. And maybe some of you heard it before, but I'll tell it, because this is a pastime that took place with Srila Prabhupada. So a couple of ISKCON devotees, they were in Vrindavan at the time, and they went to one of the very famous temples in Vrindavan. They just wanted to go and see this temple. They'd heard about it, etc. And they went there. And when they arrived there, there was the pujari, the local pujari. So he was pujari, meaning a priest looking after the deities like that. And after they'd taken darshan, they had a little exchange with this pujari or priest, this Brahmin. And he said that, he said to them that, you're such nice devotees of Krishna that Krishna will surely reward you in your next life by giving you that you can take birth in a family of Brahmins, just as I took birth in a family of Brahmins like that. So this pujari is basically saying, you're nice devotees, so certainly Krishna, next time around, Krishna will give you the benediction or the boon of being born in a Brahmin family. Just like he had been born in a Brahmin family. So then they went back to the Krishna Balaram Mandir, or ISKCON's temple in Vrindavan, where, conveniently enough, Srila Prabhupada just happened to be, on his various travels and journeys. This is where he happened to be at that time. And then they got to see Srila Prabhupada a little later that day, or whatever it may have been. They got to see Srila Prabhupada, and they asked him a question, basically. They just told him the story that had happened, and what this Brahmin had said to them. So Srila Prabhupada says, oh, that's interesting, and says, let me tell you a little story. So Prabhupada tells them a story. You can just imagine, sitting there with Srila Prabhupada and Prabhupada telling this story. Anyway, he said that one day, during the time of the British Raj, there was an old lady, and she lived in a remote village. So any of you who have been to India, India is like most countries in that sense. There's rural and city, so vastly different, particularly in India, because the cities are so chaotic and hectic and busy and all of that. But then you go into rural India, it's a completely different thing. Many of the villages, of course it's changing now, but certainly in Prabhupada's time, they would have been wouldn't have had any electricity, etc., and people would have lived in a very, simple and natural way, actually. So anyway, there was this lady. She lived in this very remote village, and there was a dispute in the family, her family, over some land like that. So what happened at that time was you used to have different British officers, like magistrates, etc., and they used to visit different places, and whatever, hear different people's issues that they had. So this magistrate came upon this particular lady, and she explained her situation, and the magistrate looked into it, because the lady was thinking that she that there was potential that she was being cheated, etc. So he looked into, this magistrate, British magistrate, looked into the whole thing, and he very quickly concluded that the quarrel that was taking place, that it was unfair on the old lady, and she was essentially being cheated by some family member or family members like that. So he immediately made arrangements for the whole thing to be sorted out, and for the land to be put in her name, and all of that. Basically he was doing the right thing and correcting whatever had gone on, and whatever sort of injustice was being inflicted on the old lady. So he corrected all of that. So the lady, naturally, she was really ecstatic when this happened. She's very, very happy about this. So she said, oh, I have to give you a blessing. So she was saying this to the magistrate. Now, actually, this role of the magistrate was quite a high role. It was actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur, actually, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was worked as a magistrate under the British rule, and certainly it was the highest position that the British were willing to give to an Indian national like that. So it was a high position. Being one of these magistrates was quite a high position. So when the magistrate was leaving and had solved all the problem for this old lady, she said, "Oh, I really want to give you a blessing." And he says, "Oh, that's very kind of you," or whatever like that. And she said, "So, I really give you a blessing that you become a policeman in your next life." So, and he kind of laughed, whatever, and then that was the end of the thing. So Prabhupada explains that for that lady living in a remote village, for her, the most kind of senior person, certainly in a material context, the most kind of senior person and respected person and senior role in her village that she'd ever seen was that of a policeman. That was what she had seen and understood. So therefore, that person for her was, at the top of the pecking order, so to speak. So when this gentleman, this magistrate, had helped her like that, she wanted to give him that blessing that he would get, promoted, if you like, and get some, so for her it was a blessing, it was a boon, it was a good thing to be doing. But of course for the magistrate, he was laughing. He didn't say it to her, but he was laughing because obviously a district magistrate like that is a much higher position, relatively speaking, a much higher position than a policeman. So Prabhupada was just making the point, telling that story, making the point to these devotees that you are devotees, you're Vaishnavas, you're engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're already way beyond, as instructed to us by Lord Chaitanya, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nasi Sudra Kenanai, as instructed to us by Lord Chaitanya, you're already way above a Brahmin. You're a Vaishnava like that. So this blessing that this Brahmin priest gave to you is on the same level and the same as that old lady giving the blessing to the district magistrate to become a policeman. So these are all very important points for us to understand, not to get fixated and absorbed in material designations and material considerations, and to understand that spirit and spiritual knowledge, spiritual activity, spiritual engagement, it just breaks free of all of those material considerations, and those material considerations have no bearing anymore. In Bhagavad Gita, we there's different verses. There's the Vijja Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavani Hastini Sunicheva Swapakacha Pandita Samadarshana, that on the spiritual platform everybody is equal. Everybody is equal. So we may see and of course it takes, a humble sage is the phrase that's used, somebody with transcendental vision to see that. But they will see with equal vision whether someone is a learned brahmana, whether someone is in the body of a cow or an elephant or a dog, and even a dog eater is the description given. So for us, a dog eater is so low, but they are a spiritual being. And once they realize their spiritual identity, once they understand that their birth as a dog or a dog eater is a temporary material designation, and they start acting on the eternal platform of the soul of who they actually are, then that material designation has no bearing anymore. And this is just such a fundamental principle and understanding of the Krishna conscious philosophy. Then also Krishna says a little later in Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshos strinapriya, that I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I'm equal to all. However, whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, and I am also a friend to them. So Krishna's equal to everybody. He has the most perfect spiritual vision of anyone and everyone. Most perfect spiritual vision. So he is actually equal to anyone. So, but at the same time, it's interesting, if we just, Krishna's a person, we're persons, if we render him loving devotional service and we become his friend, then obviously Krishna's going to be naturally disposed towards us, but ultimately sees everybody as equal. So once we act on this spiritual platform, all of these restrictions, constrictions, relativity, all of these things become completely meaningless. And that's basically the pastime that we're learning of now. Vidura took birth as a Sudra, but actually he's one of the 12 Mahajans, one of these extraordinarily powerful, great personalities. So some people may have seen from a relative perspective Vidura in a certain way, but actually that was an incorrect vision. And just like, the police arrested Manduka Muni, and it was a case of mistaken identity, to see Vidura, and anyone, not just Vidura, this is what's important to us, anyone, regardless of their birth. This is what freaked out, at the time of Lord Chaitanya 530 years ago. This is what freaked out so many of the local people, and including the Brahmanas, the caste Brahmanas, who were fixed on this understanding of the importance of caste. And of course, the difference between Varnashram and caste as well, even from, if you like, a material perspective, is that the whole caste system is based exclusively on birth. My father was a Brahmin, therefore I'm a Brahmin, etc. My father was a Sudra, therefore I must be a Sudra. But actually, the Varnashram system is not based on janma or birth, it's based on guna and karma. your karma and your current activities like that. That determines your varna and your ashram, etc. But then above that again, even taking that into consideration, still, if you're acting on the platform of devotion and devotional service to Lord Sri Krishna, then none of these designations have any are applicable in any way, shape or form. Nobody should be taking them into consideration, and the individual themselves, if they're acting on the platform of devotional service, are not bound by any of those material shackles. They are completely transcendental to all of them, as explained by Lord Chaitanya, Bhagavad Gita, etc. Okay, I think I will finish there. I'm not even sure what time it is actually, but I think I will finish there. Everybody has their busy life, just like Yamaraj had his busy life dealing with those living entities engaged in not so wonderful activities, and he was very busy doing that. So we all have busy lives doing whatever we have to do, so I won't take too much of his time. And I will see you, I think, same time, same place next week. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for listening. And Hare Krishna, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada.